Democracy depends on a free press. Please support our independent journalism at democracynow.org/give. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. President Trump has escalated his attacks on Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, describing him as a, quote, dictator without elections. Trump went on to push Zelensky to negotiate with Russia, saying he, quote, better move fast or he's not going to have a country left, unquote. This comes a day after Trump falsely accused Ukraine of starting the war. Trump also falsely said Zelensky's approval rating was down at 4%, when polls show about 57% of Ukrainians support him, far higher than Trump's favorability ratings in a recent Reuters poll. Trump also falsely claimed the U.S. has supplied Ukraine with $350 billion worth of aid. In fact, government data show U.S. spending on Ukraine since 2022 has totaled about $185 billion, with 70% of the money going to U.S. weapons manufacturers here at home. On Wednesday, Zelensky responded by saying Trump's, quote, surrounded by disinformation. Trump's attacks on Zelensky have shocked many across Europe and in Washington, where even Republican lawmakers have begun to criticize Trump's shift toward Russia. Republican Senator Susan Collins said, quote, we must remember the instigator of this war was President Putin, who launched an unprovoked attack on Ukraine, unquote. Zelensky is meeting today in Kyiv with U.S. envoy Keith Kellogg. In the occupied West Bank, Israeli forces shot and killed 3 Palestinians during an overnight raid on a house in the Farah refugee camp. Elsewhere, Israeli forces shot and wounded a 15-year-old boy during a raid on the town of Beta and wounded 2 young men in a raid on Beit Farouk. This follows Israeli attacks on several schools operated by the UN's Palestinian Refugee Agency, UNRWA, which Israel has banned. A spokesperson for the UN Secretary-General condemned the raids.
The use of tear gas and sound bombs in educational environments while students are learning is both unnecessary and unacceptable. This is a clear violation of Israel's obligation under international law.
Tens of thousands of Palestinians have fled refugee camps in the West Bank amidst Israel's offensive. This week, residents of Tulkarem camp looked on as Israeli armored bulldozers razed their homes.
I'm watching our home getting demolished, and it's one of the oldest houses in Tulkarem camp. It was suddenly wiped off the face of the earth. They wiped away all of our memories of life in that house, of all the good and not so good days, all gone. Thank God nothing will move our steadfastness on this land.
In Gaza, Hamas has returned the bodies of 4 hostages to Israeli authorities ahead of the planned release this weekend of 6 living hostages in exchange for thousands of Palestinian captives held in Israeli jails. Hamas says the 4 hostages were killed along with their guards by Israeli airstrikes. They include a mother and 2 of her children, and Oded Lifshitz, an Israeli journalist and a peace activist. Before his capture on October 7, 2023, Lifshitz volunteered with the Road to Recovery organization, which transports Palestinian children who are ill to hospitals in Israel. He once met with the late Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat and previously fought a successful legal campaign to restore ancestral land to Palestinian Bedouin villagers. Israel's Knesset has approved a bill to further restrict entry to critics of Israel and its policies. Under the new law, people who deny or minimize the October 7th Hamas attacks will be refused visas. So, too, will people who've called for the prosecution of Israeli soldiers for war crimes or who are affiliated with groups calling to boycott, divest, or sanction Israel. On Wednesday, Israel's military said it had indicted 5 reservists accused of torturing a Palestinian prisoner at the notorious Taman military base. The Association for Civil Rights in Israel reports prisoners there have routinely suffered sexual assault, beatings from guards, maulings from attack dogs, and are often made to sit on the ground blindfolded and handcuffed 24 hours a day, forbidden from moving or speaking. Meanwhile, the Gaza pediatrician, Dr. Hussam Abu Safia, has been seen in video footage for the first time since his abduction by Israeli forces outside the besieged and devastated Kamel Adwan Hospital last December, where he served as director. Video broadcast on Israeli TV appears to show Dr. Abu Safia being led by masked and helmeted guards through a prison in shackles, appearing exhausted and fatigued. In a statement, Dr. Abu Safia's family condemned the broadcast, writing, quote, "We reject any media outlet publishing the video without addressing the psychological terrorism involved in exposing the manipulation of his statements. The sight of our father shackled and unable to move should prompt immediate and continuous action to ensure his immediate release," unquote. A group of migrants recently deported from the United States are now being held in a detention camp on the outskirts of the Darien jungle in Panama. The group includes 8 children and immigrants from countries including Afghanistan, China, India, Iran, Nepal, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Turkey, Uzbekistan, and Vietnam. About 200 other people deported by the U.S. are being held in a hotel in Panama where they're barred from leaving. In related news, the White House posted a video online showing a group of shackled immigrants being loaded onto a deportation flight. The video was captioned ASMR, a term that describes pleasant audio or visual stimuli. In other developments, the Trump administration has ordered legal and immigrant nonprofit groups to halt offering federally funded legal services and advice to unaccompanied migrant children. Meanwhile, the Texas Observer has identified the operator of a racist and hate-filled anti-immigrant account on the social media platform X as 44-year-old James Joseph Rodden, Assistant Chief Counsel for Immigration and Customs Enforcement in the Dallas area. Among the account's hate-filled messages were, quote, "Migrants are all criminals," unquote. Quote, "It is our holy duty to guard against the foreign hordes," unquote. And, quote, "Nobody is proposing feeding migrants into tree shredders," unquote. In Gainesville, Texas, a funeral was held Wednesday for Jocelyn Rojo Carranza, an 11-year-old girl who died by suicide after classmates bullied her and threatened to call immigration services to deport her parents. Jocelyn was in the 6th grade. Her family said she loved playing the French horn, making TikTok videos, and swimming. New York's Metropolitan Transportation Authority has sued the Trump administration over President Trump's new order to halt New York City's congestion pricing program just 6 weeks after it began. The toll program aimed to reduce traffic in Manhattan while hoping to fund mass transit. On Wednesday, Trump wrote on Truth Social, quote, "Congestion pricing is dead. Manhattan and all of New York is saved. Long live the king." The White House's official X account then shared an image of a fake Time magazine cover of Trump wearing a golden crown, also with the headline, "Long live the king." Separately, White House Deputy Chief of Staff Taylor Bodowich shared an AI-generated image of Trump wearing a crown and royal mantle. New York Governor Kathy Hochul responded Wednesday afternoon.
I'm here to say New York hasn't labored under a king in over 250 years. And we are not. We sure as hell are not going to start now.
President Trump's monarchical claims, which are unprecedented in U.S. history, came a day after he signed an executive order giving himself greater power over independent regulatory agencies, which, by congressional mandate, are supposed to be shielded from interference by the chief executive. Agencies falling under Trump's order include the Consumer Product Safety Commission, the Securities and Exchange Commission, and the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. The IRS says they'll begin firing about 6,700 workers as part of the Trump administration's sweeping efforts to gut the federal workforce. This follows a similar downsizing of the IRS during Trump's first presidential terms, when for the first time ever, working families were audited at a higher rate than households with income over $1 million. AP reports Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency is seeking access to the IRS's integrated data retrieval system, which contains sensitive taxpayer records of millions. Meanwhile, the nonprofit NGO, the International Rescue Committee, says it's laying off and furloughing thousands of workers around the world, citing, quote, the difficulty accessing funds dispersed through the U.S. government's payment system. Aid organizations say the cuts will impact programs for HIV-positive children, feeding centers for malnourished people, and water sanitation, among many others. Federal workers and labor activists around the country held a national day of action in dozens of cities Wednesday, demanding an end to mass firings ordered by President Trump and DOJ. Here in New York, protesters rallied at Federal Plaza in Lower Manhattan. Chris Doles is president of Local 98 of the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers.
The entire public sphere is under attack by a handful of billionaires who see an opportunity right now to smash and grab the entire civil service, take out the entire services that we provide in the process, and it's going to take a long time to put it back together if we let them break it. So we have to stop them before they get away with it.
Chris Doles will join us after headlines for more on the federal workers' pushback on Trump's cuts. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has ordered Pentagon officials to find ways to shift $50 billion in the Pentagon's current budget to help fund President Trump's priorities, including immigration operations on the southern border. While many press accounts claimed Hegseth is calling for an 8% budget cut, the Pentagon's own statements indicate the agency is just looking to realign how its $850 billion budget is spent. One official said the Pentagon will be shifting money away from, quote, so-called climate change and other woke programs, unquote. In Sudan, the Rapid Support Forces paramilitary group has announced plans to form a breakaway government 22 months after it launched a civil war against Sudan's military rulers. The conflict sparked the world's largest humanitarian crisis, with tens of thousands killed and over 12 million people uprooted from their homes. This week, the United Nations launched an appeal for $6 billion in aid to Sudan, where humanitarian groups say more than half the people have too little to eat and famine is taking hold. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, the Rwanda-backed M23 fighters are marching on the eastern city of Uvira near the border with Burundi, triggering panic with residents reporting widespread looting, bodies lying in the streets, and government forces commandeering boats to escape the insurgents' advance. M23 is also advancing on the city of Butembo, north of Goma, which the insurgents seized earlier this month in an offensive that killed some 3,000 people. The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights has accused M23 of killing children, attacking hospitals and warehouses, storing humanitarian aid. This is UNHCR spokesperson.
Our office has confirmed cases of summary execution of children by M23 after they entered the city of Bukavu last week. We're also aware that children were in possession of weapons. We call on Rwanda and M23 to ensure that human rights and international humanitarian law are respected.
UNHCR also confirmed between 10,000 and 15,000 people have fled into Burundi over the last few days. We'll have more on the escalating tensions and violence in the eastern DRC later in the broadcast. And New York Governor Kathy Hochul has deployed 3,500 members of the New York National Guard to help run state-run prisons, including Attica, after prison guards launched a wildcat strike. Prisoners are now being kept on lockdown, and many are being denied family visits, legal meetings, and religious services. Safia Elijah of the Alliance of Families for Justice said, quote, our family members and their incarcerated loved ones are gripped by fear of what may happen with the governor's calling in of the National Guard, unquote. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.
And I'm Nermeen Sheikh. Welcome to our listeners and viewers across the country and around the world.
Democracy Now! Is funded by viewers like you. Please give today at democracynow.org/give.